The psychology of extremes. Many people love watching extreme sports, but at the same time, what many of those same people think is that anyone who participates in extreme sports has some kind of wish to self-destruct. This is understandable, given the high risk of severe injury or death in extreme sports. However, it seems that body chemistry can help explain why some people feel the need to take risks. The thing that is responsible for feelings of pleasure is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. One theory is that people who have more dopamine receptors in their brains need more dopamine, so they look for experiences that will increase their dopamine levels. However, many people who do extreme sports say that it is actually a love of life that motivates them. This would suggest the love of the extreme is driven by more than just body chemistry and a self-satisfying dose of dopamine. One reason why extreme sports have become increasingly popular may have to do with human history and modern life. In the distant past, life was difficult and dangerous. Leaving the safety of your house or your town might mean being eaten by a bear or killed by enemy invaders. In the modern world, people are not often faced with physical danger. This means that we don't have many opportunities to learn how to manage our emotions at times of high stress. When we feel stressed by traffic jams, problems at work, or school deadlines, we don't always stay calm because getting upset or angry will not negatively affect our chances of survival. However, people who participate in extreme activities have to learn to stay calm because their physical survival depends on it. Therefore, all they are thinking about is what they need to do next. Another misunderstanding about extreme sports athletes is that they have no fear. The opposite is true. What these athletes say is that fear is important. It is the fear of what could happen if they make a mistake that keeps them alive. First, they accept that there are high levels of risk with their sport, and they know exactly what the risks are and how to avoid them. Second, they are extremely self-disciplined. No top athlete goes out to a wild party the night before a dangerous athletic activity. They also have great self-control and do not let their emotions affect their judgment. Fear helps athletes to make decisions, but they do not let it dominate them. Athletes have a great amount of self-confidence, and never will they let self-doubt keep them from trying something difficult. However, they also have a strong sense of self-preservation and self-awareness. What they want is to stay safe, and they know their own limitations. Finally, they are excellent planners. They spend hours and hours going over all of the details of whatever specific activity they are planning. They try to anticipate all the things that could go wrong and figure out what to do in each case. What keeps them safe is careful planning and attention to detail. These same characteristics are the qualities that people need to become top athletes, to explore space, or to become police officers. The world needs risk takers.
Today, I'm going to talk about a common scientific method that we can all use in our daily lives. We all ask a lot of questions, but scientists use questions in a specific way to form conclusions about how and why things happen. A scientist looks at a situation, asks questions about it, and based on the answers, comes to a conclusion. This conclusion is called a hypothesis. We can follow this same process to form conclusions about things that happen in everyday life. One of the most important questions to ask is, if X happens, what will be the result? You predict the answer based on logic and your knowledge of the situation. This answer becomes your conclusion or hypothesis. Finally, you have to try to verify or prove your hypothesis. Here is an example. A man climbed a tall tree in his backyard to cut some branches. He was tied to a long rope, but he fell from the branch and was hanging from the end of the rope. The problem you need to solve is, how did he get down from the tree? These are the facts that we know. The man was 50 years old and a retired military officer. His cell phone fell out of his pocket when he fell. His knife did not fall out of his pocket. His wife was in the house listening to a podcast on her headphones. He was hanging from a large limb several feet from the trunk of the tree and about 30 feet from the ground. The nearest neighbors live a mile away. To form a hypothesis, we can ask questions like these. First, what if the man yelled for his wife to ask her to call for help? Second, what would happen if he used the knife to cut the rope? Third, could he use his feet and arms to climb up the rope to the limb? Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to write a hypothesis and then we'll discuss your conclusions and how to test them.
How to successfully read a room. Suppose you are going to conduct a meeting for a new project at work. You call your team members and they gather in the conference room. Walking in, do you instantly pick up on the feelings of the people there? Who's anxious? Who's excited? Who would rather be anywhere else but in that room? The expectation is that everyone will be happy when a new project arrives. But if you are not able to understand why some people are not happy, you won't be able to get the best out of your team. After all, when people are not happy about something, you can't expect them to give their best. Knowing how to read the room is a vital workplace skill, says Marcella Davis, the author of 21st Century Leadership Skills. Team leaders must be able to understand people, their fears, hopes, and motivations, she says. Called reading a room by psychologists, this is a skill that anyone can learn. Here are some tips. The best way to read a room is to pay close attention to people's behavior. Quickly scan the room and observe who is sitting next to who seems happy, who is standing, who is silent, and how much space there is between people. Next, check out facial expressions, posture, and body language, but also look out for tiny movements, a slight frown, quick smiles, and raised eyebrows. Known as micro-expressions, these can be the most accurate sign of how someone feels. Having done this a few times, you'll find it natural. Next, try to make sense of what you think you know. Consider the people in the room and ask yourself questions about them. What's happening in their lives? What's going on in their jobs? If you don't know very much, this isn't easy, but you can still come up with ideas. It might be that someone is annoyed at having been called to the meeting at the last minute, or that someone is stressed because of issues at home. Try to keep your own emotional state as neutral as possible. If the room is full of negative energy, don't let yourself be affected by it. Remember that the negativity probably doesn't have anything to do with you. After the meeting, when you have had time to think about possible explanations for what's going on in the room, check your understanding. You can do this by getting further information. Either ask at the end of the meeting or ask individuals in private. You could try saying something like, "In the meeting, I thought you looked a little anxious. Are you feeling okay about the project?" Having asked, you've placed a responsibility on them to explain their emotions. Actively listen to what they have to say, but also pay attention to what's not being said. The ability to read a room may be a tough skill to develop, but once you have mastered it, you should be able to navigate any social or business scenario with ease.
With me today in the studio is Dr. Lydia Davis from the University of New Mexico, a research professor in the field of human perception. You were invited to send in questions for Dr. Davis, and the response has been fantastic. They're not all going to be answered by Dr. Davis in the short time we have, but she will do her best, I'm sure.
I certainly will.
Okay, our first question comes from Nancy Wang from China. She wonders why we always hate the sound of our own voices. A great question there, Nancy, and something I can definitely relate to. Being asked to listen to my own voice is awful. It never sounds like me at all. So, Dr. Davis, what's going on there? Why does my recorded voice never sound much like how my voice sounds to me?
That is a great question, Todd. The reason has not been fully explained, to be honest. But what we do know is that when you hear other people talking, the sound travels through the air and into your ears where it vibrates or moves your eardrums. Those vibrations are then turned into sound. But when you are the one doing the talking, the vocal cords in your throat vibrate. This means there are two sources of sound: the sound that travels into your ears from your own voice, as well as the sound from your vocal cord vibrations. The fact that this sound is traveling through the empty spaces in our heads and the middle part of our ears changes the way we hear our own voice.
That's amazing.
Isn't it? In one early study from 1967, when people were played recordings of their own voice, only 38% of them were able to identify it immediately. People's perception or awareness may often be very different from reality.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. This one is from Greg Neville from Sacramento, California. He asks, what is synesthesia? I have a friend who says she has it, but I find it very hard to understand. Can you help?
I can. Synesthesia is an unusual medical condition where a person can sense things in very different ways. For example, their hearing may be closely connected to another sense, such as taste. So a person might connect certain words or sounds or names with a particular smell or taste or flavor. Or they might connect a certain color to certain numbers.
Wow. I know our audience will find this very strange. I know I do. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it is an incredibly interesting area of study, but one we don't know too much about. What we do know is that women can be affected by it more than men. Also, it is more likely to affect left-handed than right-handed people, and it appears to be inherited from one generation to another. Famous examples of people with synesthesia include Lady Gaga and Vincent van Gogh. I remember being told about a man who has synesthesia. Every sound he hears comes with its own taste. So, for example, the name Martin has the taste of a warm fruit pie. He says he doesn't like being introduced to new people. It's amazing. I would like to be given the chance to discover more about how and why synesthesia happens.
Our final question on this particular topic is about something that everyone has experienced: déjà vu. Felipe from Brasilia says, I get déjà vu sometimes, and I don't know why it happens. Yes, I know that feeling. Your consciousness tells you that you've been somewhere or experienced something before, but you haven't.
Yes, good question. No one knows the answer, though. This is another aspect of human perception that we don't know everything about. What we know is that this sensation is very common. About 70% of people claim to have experienced it, and it occurs most often in young people between the ages of 15 and 25. Personally, I think it is because most people have a very good memory for objects. We might walk into a restaurant we have never visited before, but if the tables are laid out in the same way or the furniture is the same, our intuition or gut feeling tells us that we've been there. Simple, really.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you to Dr. Lydia Davis for answering our questions, and thank you for listening.
Why we want to fit in. Group psychology. You are watching a soccer game and you see the wave making its way around the stadium toward you. How do you respond? Chances are you do the same as the rest of the crowd because, well, just because everyone else is doing it, right? Nobody needed to persuade you to do it. You just joined in. But what's actually going on in a situation like this? It may seem obvious to say that we are in charge of our own thoughts and behavior. It is hard to convince people that they are controlled by external forces. However, social psychology suggests our behavior changes when we function as part of a group rather than on our own. Humans are social beings. We spend between 70 and 80% of our waking hours in social situations where communication is necessary. Research into the effects that others have on us shows we do not have as much control over our thoughts and behavior as we think. A social situation can often discourage us. usually unconsciously, from expressing our true feelings because we want to fit in with the crowd rather than stand out from it. Early experiments. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch carried out an experiment in which volunteers were asked to judge the correct length of a line by comparing it with 3 sample lines. The experiment was set up so that there was an obviously correct answer. But within the group, there were people who were acting as volunteers. They deliberately chose the wrong answer. Because of the pressure from these fake participants, Asch found that 74% of the volunteers were put off choosing the correct answer at least once, and 32% did so all the time. In another experiment from 1968, conducted by Bibb Latané and John Darley, people, the subjects, were left alone in a room to complete a questionnaire when smoke started coming under the door. When they were alone, 75% of people reported the smoke within 2 minutes of first noticing. However, when 2 actors were there, who were working with the experimenters and told to act as if nothing was wrong, only 10% of the subjects left the room or reported the smoke. 9 out of 10 subjects actually kept working on the questionnaire while rubbing their eyes and waving smoke out of their faces. Just by continuing with the questionnaire, the 2 actors could dissuade the subjects from doing anything in a possible fire. Evolutionary advantage. We only need to look at evolution to provide reasons for why the people around us sway our opinions so much. In our evolutionary past, our ancestors were in constant danger. They needed to rely on the support of the group to help them survive. Modern humans have inherited these behaviors so that we also form social groups to deter members of those groups, where possible, from conflict and disagreement. This would suggest that our sensitivity to social conflict contributes to our desire to fit in with the crowd. So the next time you see the wave heading toward you in the stadium, you'll know why you jump up and join in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Exact Economics. Now, imagine that you own a small local clothes business. Your store has been successful for a number of years, and you frequently sell out of your stock. Then, out of the blue, a store that belongs to a global clothes retail chain opens next door. So you probably feel nervous, right? That's what our next guest, economist Troy Davenport, is going to be talking to us about. Hi there, Troy.
Hi, good morning.
In this increasingly globalized world, there are a lot of people who own independent businesses who are scared of competition from multinational chains. Should they be?
Well, in economics, everyone welcomes a little competition, given that competition makes businesses more creative and pushes them to have innovative ideas. It means that businesses try to create better products, and that's good for both the businesses and the consumers. But when a local business, what we call a mom-and-pop shop, has to compete with one of the big boys, they might feel nervous, especially due to the fact that they may have lower prices or more up-to-date products.
Okay, so how can a small independent clothes store compete with an international brand? Wouldn't they lose their customers and have to close down?
This is often all about fear rather than facts. In fact, it could be the other way around. If you own a local business and a global brand moves in next door, it could be the best thing that's happened to you.
But why would people go to a more expensive, smaller store with fewer options when they can go for a cheaper, well-known alternative with much more choice?
I think that's the key word, choice. People like to feel like they have a choice when they are shopping. At first, many people may be attracted to a new branch of an international brand, but soon things will start to look up as people start seeing the mom-and-pop shop as a new alternative rather than a less interesting or outdated business.
So that's why a lot of local businesses are still successful?
Yes, but it's not only about that. There's also the added factor of ethnocentrism. This is when people start to take pride in buying local products rather than international brands. This is often the case with many coffee stores. If a large branch of an international coffee chain opens in your town, there will be a lot of interest at first. But after that, local stores tend to adapt as they have a better understanding of local people's needs. That kind of thing can make businesses really take off. And since the local people feel proud of where they live, they are also proud to get coffee from their local store, and they are often put off by a big generic brand.
So, because of that, it's actually the multinational brands who might have a harder job to attract customers?
Exactly. So if you're a mom-and-pop store out there, don't back out of competition with the big boys, because in fact, it might be one of the best things that's happened to your business in years.
It seems like a long time since we were at school. Do you ever wonder how much of it was useful?
I guess the stuff we learned, like how to get along with people, how to study, I guess we'd take all that for granted. So, in a sense, it was useful. Except sports. Were you forced to play regular sports at your school?
Well, I wouldn't put it quite like that. We did it, yes, like everyone else. I remember doing gymnastics and track and field events. I'm guessing that yours wasn't a very positive experience.
You can say that again. I remember playing basketball. Ugh. I think the worst thing was that they showed no understanding toward people like me, people who weren't very good.
That's unfortunate. I wasn't very good either, but I used to look forward to playing sports, especially when it was basketball.
And there was no variety. I would have loved to be able to try out different events, like we see at the Olympics.
I was going to say something similar. If schools would only teach a whole range of things, students would be sure to find something that suited them. You know, if they taught the basic Olympic events, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, but wouldn't that mean a lot of expense? I mean, there's all the equipment, and you'd need dedicated instructors.
True, but schools could share facilities and expertise as well.
It could work, I suppose. You know, I think my experiences at school are the reason why I never did any sports after I left. I know I should get more exercise, but as soon as I had a choice, I dropped it from my life.
I understand, and it's a real shame. I mean, we make sports compulsory in school so that we can get healthier. But if it put you off so much, it had the opposite effect. I think things would have been different if you'd found something you loved.
I guess. I think it's a good idea in principle. I think my problem came down to my teacher.
Luckily, I had good teachers, and I developed a lifelong love of basketball, even if I'm not very good at it.
So you found your Olympic event?
Actually, I don't believe basketball should be in the Olympics.
Why not?
Because it's so established. You know the problem, don't you?
Because it's not fair on the other countries?
Well, you might have a point, but that's not what I had in mind. I think the problem is that the Olympics only happen every 4 years. And yes, it's great to represent your country, but think about the top athletes for a moment. They don't need the Olympics because, as I said, basketball is so established. Basketball has its own tournaments, leagues, and competitions, and they're huge. Can we really expect a top basketball player to interrupt training and go and play for the country?
Wait, though. You're saying that basketball at club level or team level is more important than representing your country in the Olympics?
I'm saying we don't need every sport and activity to be represented. Look at soccer. Countries can send professionals who are under 23 plus 3 older players. However, if a club doesn't want the player to go to the Olympics, they don't go. And we're left wondering what the point is because some countries will send the best they have, while others, obviously, are keeping their star players away. It's not a fair contest.
Right. Going back to what we were saying about schools, I think the Olympic ideals are what we should be teaching through sports. Children should learn about friendship and fair play, not winning at all costs.
And equality, don't forget. We've come a long way toward getting girls and women included in sports. Remember how it used to be? When certain activities were for boys only? They've changed all that.
Finally? Yeah, I think schools have a great responsibility. That's where change is going to start.
Even if I'll never be an Olympic athlete.
You never know. One day. So I'd like to begin by looking at some of the aspects of inequality that affect people's lives today. First of all, I think most people in the room today would instinctively feel that inequality is a bad thing. There are, however, people who consider it natural, and we should not forget this, because it is, after all, a subject that can stir up very strong emotions. If we look at the effect of inequality in economic terms, there is little doubt that it can have very negative effects. Now, whether this is company-wide or country-wide depends on many factors, but let me introduce one or two so that you can begin to think about them before we get to discuss them in detail. First of all, income inequality. This leads to dissatisfaction. As you can imagine, people are displeased when they learn that someone is earning a far greater amount of money than them, particularly if the lower-paid worker does not feel the higher amount is deserved. Other things happen too. Over-consuming becomes a phenomenon among the higher-paid group, while borrowing becomes a feature of the lower-paid group. The widening gap contributes to a whole range of other phenomena in society. I will say this before we move on. Productivity drops when you reduce a low-paid worker's income, but there have been recent studies that show that when you increase a highly paid worker's income by the same amount, it does not increase their productivity as much as it decreases in the first example. This all suggests that there is a direct link between income inequality and reduced productivity. But that's just money and profit. What about the cost in human lives and health in societies that are unequal? The data we've gathered suggests that inequality shortens life expectancy. There is also a body of evidence to support the idea that mental health is threatened, in part, by the increase in stress and anxiety. More on that later. Let's just take a look at the level of inequality in sports, something we see every day but maybe don't question enough. You'll have noticed that women in sports are slowly gaining a higher profile. Well, I stress the word slowly here, but we have come a long way since the founder of the modern Olympics openly stated that there are certain things in sports that women are just not cut out to do. Nowadays, we accept women in nearly all areas of sports, but, as I will go on to argue, we don't really accept them. Maybe we tolerate them, while at the same time, we don't give them the grants, the opportunities, the sponsorships, or the pay to even begin to consider them equal. So I'd like to present a case study for you to discuss in groups.
Apps, drones, tablets, and telemedicine. The future of healthcare seems to be in our hands. And there is one type of medical technology that could soon be giving us actual hands, as well as artificial limbs or even models of organs inside the body to help doctors diagnose and operate. When we think of 3D printing, we probably think of creating a plastic toy, but medical technology has started to reach far deeper into its possibilities. On one level, we have 3D printing for surgical instruments. Imagine a situation where a patient was being operated on, and surgeons needed to hold a very small part of the patient's body open to successfully operate in a tiny space. To do this, they would need a clamp. With a 3D printer, the surgeons could order a clamp to be made to the exact size that was needed. Another example is the use of 3D printing to plan operations. A young doctor at the Yale Center for Engineering Innovation and Design created a model of a tumor in a patient's knee. This can help doctors explore, touch, and feel the affected area before operating. The doctor also used the 3D printer to print out the patient's tumor so that the patient could also feel how it was shrinking every time he came in for a scan. The patient would not have had such tangible proof of the treatment working if 3D printing didn't exist. There is also the use of 3D printing to create prosthetics for patients who need an artificial replacement for part or all of a limb. 3D printing allows for the prosthetics to be custom-made for the patient and created with their specifications in mind. Amputees sometimes have to wait months to receive a prosthetic arm or leg, as they take a long time to build. 3D printing significantly speeds up the process and means that they can be made far more cheaply. Apart from printing prosthetic limbs, the very latest area of 3D printing is called bioprinting. 3D printing traditionally uses hard materials such as plastic or metal, but bioprinting uses human cells to create soft, living tissue. The finished product is called an organoid. At the moment, organoids are used for medical research, as they are the same as real human organs but smaller. In the future, it is hoped that surgeons will be able to print life-size human organs specifically designed for patients who need transplants. This procedure could avoid traditional problems associated with transplants, such as the patient's body rejecting the new organ. The future for medical technology looks good, and 3D printers are playing a key part in building it.